Discover, connect, engage, become. Discover, connect, engage, become. Discover, connect, engage, become with CURNcast.
Hey research friends, it's your host Lauren O'Cano, and we're back with another episode of the CURNcast. The CURNcast is all about breaking down the barriers to research and making research more accessible for all. I'm very excited to share today's episode with you, and it's all about spilling the tea on applications. So this is going to talk a lot about the UREAP scholarship that we offer at TRU, but we're going to give you some tips on how to approach any application, whether that's in your undergrad or in grad school and beyond. So let's jump into our conversation with our special guest, Sylvia Gropp. I would like to acknowledge that the CURNcast is being recorded and created on the traditional and unceded territory of the Tecumloops to Secwepemc within Secwepemcúlecw. I am very grateful to be able to learn, play, and create on these beautiful lands. Hello, welcome to our special guest of the day, who is Sylvia Gropp, who is going to talk to us a little bit about the UREAP, and we'll explain what that is if you don't know what that is, and just general applications and scholarship writing for research, which is super exciting. So welcome, Sylvia. Happy to have you.
Hi, Lauren. Thanks for having me.
And so basically, one of the reasons that I was super excited to talk to you today for this podcast is because students are always coming to us. And even as a student, when I was a student, I was like, oh, that'd be cool to get a scholarship to do research. Sometimes it's hard to find out where to apply, how to apply for those things. So hopefully this is a way to normalize some of the scholarships we have a bit and disseminate some of that information. And then just also along the lines of breaking down some of the barriers to research, just talking about what is involved in an application and giving some tips on how we can do really well on them. You obviously see a lot of the UREAPs or all the UREAPs that come through, and you know some of the really great things happening on applications and some of the maybe not so great nitpicky things that you wish students knew more of. So I really want to get into that a little bit, and hopefully that'll help students get an idea of what's involved in these types of applications and then how to succeed and move forward if they do decide to apply for one. So I hope you're ready and excited to talk about those things. But first, I do want to do a quick lightning round just to warm us up a little bit. And how this works is I'm going to ask you a question. You can think of the first thing that comes to mind, and it can be really short, and we just want to know some of your answers to these questions, and they're all related to research. And I know you've done research yourself, which is super exciting, so I'm curious. First question is, what was the last thing that you researched?
The last thing I've been researching is actually Westwold. I got the opportunity to go through some private property that has their own museum. It's the Pringle property. Looking forward to possibly doing my doctorate around a virtual museum presence because of safety issues there.
Oh, that's fascinating. I'd love to know so much more about that. And then how about, and it might be similar, what is a current research interest of yours or something you'd like to know more about?
Really for me, because I'm an educator, I am really interested on creating sense of place in an online world. So I took most of my master's online, but how do you really connect and get students to connect with curriculum online?
Yeah. And we've seen that through like COVID and things, and I've seen some really positives come out of it, and then there's some challenges. So that's something to research, which is very cool. Next question is, what do you wish more people knew about research?
Just how many opportunities there are for research. And the fact that, I did a lot of research in my undergrad and my graduate level, and just how easy it is to get into research, but it's not as intimidating as people think it is, or how hard as people think it is.
So true. And I've heard that a couple times now, so hopefully that'll come through to our listeners. Research is not intimidating.
Yeah.
What is your research superpower?
I get told a lot my brain doesn't work like other people's brains. So I tend to look at things from a very different lens when it comes to research, and how to disseminate that research out to people is usually not within normal means.
And then last but not least, if you could share one message with future TRU student researchers, what would that be?
Basically, I don't think there's any research that's too small. I think too, like I know in my case, when I was getting into research, I just thought it was so huge and I really didn't even know where to start. And I think research really starts with just a thought, like an inquiry, like something that tickles your brain. That's research because you want to know more about it. So, for future researchers, it could just be that little brain tickle that puts you on a road to research.
So now we get into the good stuff and talk about applications and talk about the UREAP. I know as an undergrad student in my early kind of years, I heard the term being thrown around all the time and I wasn't quite sure, like, oh, what are they talking about? What's a UREAP? And then I finally talked to someone about it and it makes a lot of sense, but I would like to hear from you. What the heck is a UREAP?
Yeah, well, we call it UREAP because it's quite the mouthful to go around calling it, the Undergraduate Research Experience Award Program, which in itself can be intimidating. So it's UREAP, and it's a $6,000 scholarship, primarily for undergraduate students.
Cool. And that's to do their own research projects.
Yeah, which is really neat because, it's taking that passion of yours and giving you the support that you need to run with it.
Yeah, that seems like it ties in really nicely with your comment before about finding that area that tickles your brain and then being able to actually carry it out through this scholarship. So that's a super cool opportunity that TRU has to offer. I think you mentioned it was an undergraduate award. Can you speak a little bit more about who qualifies for the UREAP? Who can do the UREAP?
Sure. So we have a couple of things that you need in order to be eligible for it. You have to be a full-time student at TRU, and you have to be enrolled in an undergraduate program. That's pretty standard. We like to see you having 60 credits completed. Yep. Now this one throws people off and I don't want them to be scared. You'll see that we like to have a minimum GPA of 3.2. However, that's not a deal breaker. If your GPA is under 3.2, there's just an additional step to the application. We ask that you or one of your mentors write a letter with regards to why your GPA may be a little low. Like, we know how the world is right now, and there's lots of things going on, and it's hard juggling with school. So as much as we'd like to see a 3.2, that's not a deal breaker for this. You'll also, like I said before, you'll need a faculty member on campus who will act as your mentor to kind of help you with your research. You can't have held a UREAP in the past, so this is an award you can only hold once. And the other thing with this is you can't hold a UREAP as well as an NSERC USRA at the same time for the same project.
Okay.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yes. We want to give you all the opportunity to focus on your research.
That's a very clear explanation. And I think a lot of times in research, we associate scholarships and opportunities with the physical sciences and social sciences, but Can you qualify for the UREAP if you're in any program at TRU?
Yeah, definitely.
That's
For
undergraduate?
sure.
Yeah.
I have to say I've sat on quite a few of the adjudication committees, and the committees get really excited when they're getting your reaps from departments that they don't normally see. You don't have to. We still get, of course, get excited to see things from science and that sort of idea, but they get equally excited to see things coming out of fine arts and that kind of stuff as well.
Welcome to Hit the Streets. I'm Hannah.
And I'm Julianne. This is a segment where we ask strangers weirdly specific questions about research.
Now, let's hear from our first victim. What was the last type of thing you applied for?
The last thing I would have applied for would have been like a freelance graphic design job that I'm working on.
Last thing I applied for the honors program in psychology.
Like the last type of application I wrote was yesterday for a job application.
Housekeeping job.
For a job, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
The last thing I applied for was a summer position doing psychology stuff.
I'd say it'd be for my summer job.
I think the last thing I applied for was probably university, to be honest.
I think the last thing I applied for was a job over the summer in my hometown.
Yeah, same. My summer job, working back in Ontario.
And that's it for question 1. Now back to our regularly scheduled programming.
So if for some reason you don't qualify for the UREAP, or maybe a student doesn't have 60 credits quite yet, but they're still interested in research, can they still do research? Are there still opportunities to get involved or to work your way up towards doing a UREAP?
Oh, of course. Yeah, there's a lot of opportunities for research on campus, starting right off from your first year of university. We're really trying to move past this idea that you can't really do research until you're in your third or fourth year of your program. I always recommend that people go to our website, check out all the opportunities there. They're more than welcome to email us. We're at studentresearch@true.ca, and we can give them more information that way. So I think in total, I adjudicate about 25 awards a year. So there's quite a few opportunities for students.
And even if it's not doing a full scholarship or doing your own project right away, there's always opportunities to kind of get your feet wet and get a feel for research before you decide to jump in head first and do your own project, which is very cool.
Yeah, and I always recommend to students, like, if you have that one prof that you really get along with, or you happen to know what their background is in research, definitely go chat with them, because even if you're not feeling like you're prepared to do your own research, there's opportunities to be paired up with a faculty member and help support their research as well.
So next, I want to look a little bit more closely at the UREAP. So as I mentioned before, you do get to see a lot of applications. You sit on the committee for adjudication sometimes, and I'm sure there's things that come in that you're super excited about and you love to see, and then I'm sure there are some things that aren't so great to see. So I'm curious, maybe we can start with the do's of the UREAP application. So what do we love to see on an application?
Well, the UREAP is a little bit different when it comes to applications. Students apply through a program called Romeo. And really why we do that is this is the same platform that faculty need to apply for faculty awards. So it's like a training opportunity for students. However, it's a program that a lot of students have never seen. So I cannot stress enough going to the help guide, which is online for UREAP, because literally this guide will hold your hand and tell you, enter this, enter this, enter this. I like to tell students, you want to make it as easy as possible for basically the adjudication committee to look at your application. You have to think that sometimes these people are reviewing over 50 applications. So always make sure that you've gone through the help guide, you've filled everything out. I find a lot of times students miss key components. So for example, for UREAP, you need 2 faculty mentor letters. Now those have to come directly to me, they don't come through the student. And both of those faculty members should be on campus. And that's kind of a safeguard for a student. We want somebody on campus that can support the student should something happen. The student is more than welcome to have an additional member, say in the community, if they're doing community-driven research. They can definitely also write you a letter, but you need to have those 2 applications from your faculty member by the deadline. So yeah, we don't want to see those coming in late. We don't accept late applications. And usually I'm making an application ineligible, basically because the student has forgot something in their application. So always make sure you've attached all your paperwork.
So double checking and following that UREAP guide and making sure that all of the appropriate documents and everything are attached. That's great advice. And for any application, not just the UREAP. And then you touched on a few of the don'ts. Are there any other things that you see that maybe it's a good kind of flag to wave at students for them to remember when they're writing applications on what not to do when writing a UREAP?
Basically, I know this sounds horrible, but really just submit what you're asked to submit. Because you're spending this time sending in a bunch of documents that we just don't even attach to your application because the committee doesn't want to see it. So I don't want students feeling stressed or panicking because they want to put all these additional pieces in. We're not asking for those, so they're not even going to be looked at in the case of that. Always, not necessarily for UREAP, but just in general for other applications, especially if you went to school elsewhere and you're submitting those transcripts, to make sure you have the time to get those and attach them. Transcripts tends to be the number one reason why I make applications ineligible, is because I'm not getting proper transcripts that were requested.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
And then with all these things, there is the help guide. We are sharing some of these tips and tricks, but if students have more specific questions, what's your advice for where they can go? Where can you get help with your UREAP?
Oh, definitely reach out to us. There's never a stupid question. If you're second guessing yourself in your application, always send us an email at the student research at True. It's constantly monitored, and we have a pretty quick turnaround for students. And it's much easier for them just to reach out to us and double check and have that peace of mind rather than guessing and maybe guessing wrong and then their application's ineligible.
I like that. That's great advice. So always rely on the people of the research office. If you have questions, we're here and happy to help.
Always. That's what we're here for, right? Like we're actually a pretty laid back group of people. So yeah, we're here to help you, and we want you to succeed, and we want you to be successful in your research, and that moves forward even when you're doing your UREAP. You may have, when you first put your application in, you were wanting to publish and go to a conference or something like that, and something has happened, and you have to change the outcome of your project. That's something else that you can definitely reach out to us for, and we can always adjust it as well.
Hey, welcome back to Hit the Streets. Hear that funky music beat? Let's hear from question 2 now.
What was the most challenging part of writing that application?
Finding a reference so that I can copy from them, honestly.
Okay.
That's better than doing it by yourself.
Honestly, the fact that you submit your resume and then you have to go back through and write all the pieces of your resume again for the application.
The most challenging thing was me trying to find a parallel between the job description and what I have done, and trying to present in a way that I I've currently done this thing and I have that like certain kind of experience.
I don't know how to write my skills and qualifications perfectly, like according to the job.
I would say getting the references was a pretty tricky part. It's a small industry, like the adventure guiding industry, so you want to, like everyone seems to know each other, so you want to find references that are known to be credible.
My challenge was references. During the pandemic, I didn't have any connections to anyone because it was all online. So it was hard to actually find a reference I could use.
I especially not good at writing because I think English grammar is difficult for me. So it's biggest difficulties for me.
I think the most challenging thing for me is trying to relate it back to what they want. Oftentimes I get hung up on what I think is important and not so much what they think is important. So I think to kind of decipher what they want out of their application.
Well, that's it for question 2.
See you next time on Hit the Streets, folks.
So if you're reviewing applications, and I'm curious to know if there's any common themes, if there's any parts of the application that you think students particularly struggle with, and if you have any advice on that.
Usually, what I'm having to reach out to students for tends to be around their operating grant. So with the UREAP, you have the $6,000 scholarship that gets paid out in 2 installments when you first start your UREAP, and at the end when it's completed is when you get your second half. But the UREAP also has this secondary component to it that you can get up to $1,000 for an operating grant. So that's to help support you with whatever your research may be. Whether it's you need pencil crayons because you're doing mapping or you're doing a comic or whatever, it's to help you with your supplies. And a lot of times I'll have them come in and they're not asking for an operating grant at all. Some are over and above, especially tends to be in the sciences. So if you are doing your operating budget and say, for example, your budget that you need to do your research is $1,500, that's the time that you know, okay, well, I have $1,000 that'll cover it off. You also need to account from where that extra $500 is coming from. And that is a conversation that you'll need to have with your faculty member because there is other options to fund that extra $500, but it needs to be justified in your application. So that's usually the number one. Even if you're doing your application, you're like, oh, no, I'm not going to need this operating grant. Always talk to your faculty member and confirm, because it's better to ask for it ahead of time and not use it than be in the middle of your research and all of a sudden realize that, yes, you actually do need those additional funds.
And I think that's a really great lesson. Most undergrads who are applying for UREAP don't have a lot of experience with budgeting and understanding, how much it actually costs to buy supplies for your research. So I think that's a great piece of the application that students have to go through and learn. And it's something that you'll have to keep doing if you stay involved in research, because funding is important. So
yeah, that's really the purpose of this grant. It is, yes, of course we want to help you do your research, but we're also helping you learn kind of the process that you need. Definitely hang on to receipts. For sure. I recommend either scanning them or taking a picture of them as soon as you have them, because they are usually asked for at the end of your project.
And then there's one other section of the application that I think sometimes students might struggle with because it's different depending on what type of research that you're doing. So that's, of course, the ethics section. And for some projects, you might not need to do this section. It's easy breezy. And then for some projects, you really need to get in depth about that. So I'm just curious, what's your advice to students on that? And do you have any tips when approaching the ethics section?
Oh, yes, ethics. I remember it. It's very intimidating. And you also have to realize that ethics can take a while to get your certification for. Right. We have a designated ethics compliance officer in the office, Trisha. She is fantastic. Basically, a good rule of thumb when it comes to ethics, if you're dealing with humans or animals, we want to talk to you. If you're more in the sciences, and we like to say you're dealing with stuff that's gross, like blood, that kind of idea, talk to your faculty member, because usually they have already dealt with the biosafety and they can better guide you on whether or not you actually need to apply. We have a lot of pieces that students can go to for more information. There's a whole ethics section on our website. It also has the email addresses for Trisha, who, again, she checks her emails. So that's kind of what we recommend. Like, again, we're here to help you. We don't want you to stress and try to do it all yourself. Feel free to get a hold of us. A lot of the faculty members are already dealing with their own research, so they are well versed in getting ethics as well. So we're here to support you with that.
Yeah, and it seems like just overall what I'm hearing is, yeah, it is a scholarship that you're learning to navigate on your own, and a lot of this stuff will be new, but there is lots of support, both in the office, and then that's why you have faculty mentors as well who have most likely been through the process, and if not UREAP, a similar application process before. So you're not alone.
Yeah, please reach out to us. We want to help you. So yes, if it's an animal or a human, you're probably going to need ethics. The biohazard, on the fence.
Just lastly, I'm wondering in general, when we're thinking about applications, because we do have lots of opportunities both in our office and then students who are maybe graduating and going off to exciting things like grad school and applying for post-grad programs. There's going to be applications. So I'm just wondering, any last pieces of advice for students to really stand out on applications and do really well?
That's a great question, and it's going to vary depending on what you're applying for. And, it really comes down to the simple things. Like I said, I adjudicate a lot, and I see a lot of times that obviously students apply for multiple awards, and sometimes it's as simple as they don't change what award they're applying for and submit the same cover letter. Which doesn't look great. It's kind of like the same if you have a resume and you're cover lettering for a job, and so it's little things like that, making sure that you're actually answering the questions that are asked of you. A lot of times we really want to know who you are, what you're passionate about, what you've been doing, kind of how you got to where you're at, like what made your brain tickle, and really passionate about the research you're doing. So again, a lot of our awards spell out right on the application exactly what we want. I prefer, and this is just me, I love things in PDF, and it's a safety thing for you because they're locked in. But yeah, just make sure you're going through and be like, yes, I submitted this. Yes, I submitted that. And a lot of times our awards do overlap when they're due, so it's always good to check application dates just to make sure you have everything prepared ahead of time.
Yeah, so it sounds like it's important to nail down those details and get really familiar with what you actually do need to supply, and then deliver that, and don't over deliver and put things in that are not needed, right? You don't need to make extra work for yourself. So is there anything else that you want to share about the UREAP, or any last advice in general for students?
Basically, the nice thing about UREAP is it does have 2 intakes a year. So we have fall and we have winter. So it's always great to kind of see how that's going to work with your schedule and your life. It tends to be that our winter intake is usually much larger than our fall, because a lot of students need to have the summer or would prefer to do their research over summer to have it completed. But if it's something that you can make work in the fall, you do have those 2 options for applying. And yeah, it's a great award, and yes, it is a scholarship, but it's also a learning experience for you, and we want you to have the best experience possible, and just reach out.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much, Sylvia. I think that's all of my questions for you today. I really learned a lot about what the UREAP is, and I even learned for myself some do's and don'ts for applications in the future. So I really appreciate your time, and I really hope that if students are interested and still have questions, that they will hit up the research office and come find you and get to meet you possibly. So I hope you have a really great day, and we will see you next time on the CURNcast.
Awesome. Thanks, Lauren.
Thanks again to Sylvia for sharing all those important tips on applying for research scholarships. I hope this has inspired you to consider looking at which scholarships that you might apply for to kickstart your research journey. Thanks for tuning in to the CURNcast. We'll see you soon.